Hello. Okay. All right. It's still Shabbat. So we are in Shabbat mode. We are smiling and joyous and as the closing minutes of Shabbat. So we are on page 214, the afternoon service for Shabbat, Mincha Shabbat. So let's begin. And then we'll need a little help when the Torah is brought out. So let's go. Page 214. Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yehalelu chasela, Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, Ashrei ha'am shadonai Elohav, Tila leDavid, aromim chalai hamelech, Gadol Adonai u'melech ma'od, v'ligdado echeker, Zecher atzufcha yabiu, v'tzitchatcha yeranenu, Tov d'another kol v'rachamav v'kol masav, Kivon malchutcha yomeru, v'ratcha yedaberu, Malchutcha malchut ko olamim, V'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'ador, Somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, Zokef l'chol akfufim, Einei chol elech yisaberu, V'yatana telahenu chlam bito, Poteach et yadecha, Maspi l'chol charatzon, Tzadik Adonai b'chol doracha, V'chasi b'chol masav, Karov d'another kol korav, L'chol shekruv memet, Shomer adayit kol ohavav, V'gol sheim yashmin, Tilat Adonai yedaber pi, V'yivareko b'asa shem kodsho li'olam va'ed, V'anachnu v'rechya, Mi'ata v'yad olam, Hallelujah. By the way, we're going to need Gabayim. We're going to need maybe 2 copies of the weekday Siddur that has the Torah reading for Va'et Hanan, and that we're all set. Page 260. Uval Tzion Goel. Ve'ata kadosh yeshevti lad Yisrael, karazel zevi amar, kadosh, 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 Adonai tzavaot, melok la'aretz kevodo, mekapling temitim v'yambrim. God yishleim amamaya netzavot mayan kol ha'aretz v'kareim, v'tiseini ruach v'yashma acharei kol rash gadol, Baruch kavod Adonai, mim kamom, natani rucha. Adonai imloch li'olam, va'ed anam chutei l'malamaya, Adonai Elohim Avraham Yisav Yisrael Avotenu, Ki ata Adonai tov v'tzavaraka v'sil korecha. Baruch Adonai Yom 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 Muslan, Huay Shotena Selah. Adonai tzavod amay miskavlan, Huay Yaakov Selah. Baruch Adonai Shalom v'nikvah v'ikvadem l'natoim, V'lasod r'tzono l'avdo b'lev shalem. Yerasom efanecha, Adonai Elohim Avotenu v'imotenu, שנשמורו כדלבלם הזה ונזכה ונראה שנטובה לך ישמות המשיח ולחיי העולם הבא למען ישמח ולדום אדוני אלוהים מותקה ברוך הגבר השבט באדוני והיה אדוני מבטחו ביטחו אדוני ידי יד כי ביד אדוני צור עולמים ויבטחו וחיודי שמך כי לא עזבת דושך אדוני אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה V'yadir, please rise. Yitkada v'yitkada, Shemei Rabbah, V'yamad yivrach Yerutei, V'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon v'yomechon, V'chayedechol Beit Yisrael, B'agalav izman kari v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach, V'yalam lo me'amayam, Yiparaf v'yishtabaf, Yitbar v'yitroma v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Kedusha, Brichum, La'ela min kol b'chadav shirata, tush b'chadav nechmata, damiram b'yama, v'imru, amen. Page 218. V'ani tefilati l'cha Adonai et ratzon, Elohim barov chasecha, aneni b'yamet yishecha. We'll open the ark. I'll get a little help here. Let's open the ark. We have to take the Torah out. We have to, yeah. Okay. We'll get there. Hi, Jennifer. Rabbi Singer, hello, hello. Vayehi bin Saron, vayomer Moshe, kum Adonai v'yafutz oivecha, v'yanusam esanecha mipanecha, Ki mitzion tete Torah, udvar Adonai Yerushalayim, Baruch Shata Torah Limo Yisrael, B'kedushato. Thanks, Susan. Gadlu Adonai iti, uneramama shemo yachtav, lecha Adonai hagdula v'gvuram, v'atiferet v'hanesa v'hahol, ki chol b'shamayim v'aretz. Lecha Adonai mamlecha min aseh l'chol rosh, Romamu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ishtachavu lahadom raglavu, Romamu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ishtachavu lahar kodsho, Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We'll need a talit for our 3 aliyot, for those coming to the Torah. And I have to look this over, because I haven't looked at it. Good, we'll need for our aliyot. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Susan. Sorry I had to. We don't usually have a Shabbat Mincha service, so we're all learning the ropes here. All right, you may be seated, everybody. If you'd like to follow the Torah reading, I don't know if you have a Chumash, but of course the opening verses of the next portion, which we always read at Shabbat Mincha, Et Hanan. And if you have the weekday Siddur, it's there on page 308. Where's Vayet Hanan? Here it is. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me keep a look at the weekday, because I haven't looked at anything yet. Okay. Okay, we'll call up 3 to the Torah. We have a Kohen, a Levi, or Bat Levi, Bat Kohen. Are you, Roger? No? Yisrael. He's with all the poor folk here. That's great. Listen. It spares any problems with officiating in the cemetery. It should be in the Siddur also, the call ups, no?
Here it is. I got it.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it. Amen. Levi, Kohen, Levi, Shlishi, anybody?
Don't everyone run up at once.
Who wants the first aliyah? David. Talit, yeah.
I am David
Ben Aharon Lumageto Rishon Baruch Shenatan
Torah. V'atem adavikim b'Adonai Elohechem Chaim kuchem hayom. Now you got 20 copies. Yeah, that's right here. V'et Hanan. Let's see what the second one is. So they go even further. Okay. Baruch Adonai Barach Lilam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Voed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher bocha banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen. V'et Hanan el Adonai beit hahi lemor Adonai Elohim. Ata achilot lahar ot et avdecha et get godlecha. V'yed yadcha chazaka asher mi el bashamayim v'aretz. Asher yaseh k'mach masecha gvrotecha. Ebrana v'yarayet aretz hadova. Asher be'ever hayarden. Haharato hazeh v'halevanon. Okay?
I'll let you know when you stop.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu
All off the cuff.
אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yasher koach.
Yamod.
Rav.
Uri ben. Rafalea. Baruch Falea Sheni.
Okay. Give me a little chance to. Baruch Adonai Baruch Lelam Vaed. Amen. Vitaber Adonai bilemanchen velo shemai lai. Vayomer Adonai elai rav lecha altos rav lach altosef davar elai o badavar hazeh alehi rosh hapiskaha v'sa enecha yama v'tzafona v'teimanu mizrach orev b'einecha ki lo tavor et yeren hazeh v'tzav et Yehoshua v'chaskeu v'yamsehu כי הוא יעבור לפני העם הזה, והוא ינחיל אותם את הארץ אשר תראה ונשי בגיא מול בית פאור, ואתה ישראל שמע אל החוקים ואל המשפטים אשר אנוכי מלמד אתכם לעשות למען. תחיו ואתם וירשתם את הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם נותן לכם, לא תוסיפו על הדבר הזה, אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם, ולא תגרעו ממנו, לשמור את מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם, עיניכם הרואות, את אשר עשה אדוני בבעל פאור, כי כל האיש אשר הולך אחרי בעל פאור, השמידו אדוני אלוהיך מקרבך, ואתם הדבקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו עולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Well done. Yasher koach. Shabbat shalom.
Yehudit bat. Leah v'Yoshua. Shlishi.
Right here, Ra'im.
Is it Maftir or Shlishi?
Shlishi, yeah. It's a long retort. Baruch Adonai Baruch Lelam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Lelam Vaed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chapanu im kol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Rei limati etchem chukim u'mishpatim kasher tzivani Adonai Elohai לעשות כן בקרב הארץ ששרתם באים שם לרשתה ושמרתם ועשיתם כי הוא חוכמתכם ובינת. Did that right? כי היא, oh, that doesn't change. כי היא חוכמתכם ובינתכם לעיני העמים אשר ישמעון את כל החוקים האלה ואמרו רק עם חכם ונבון הגוי הגדול הזה כי מי גוי גדול אשר לו אלוהים קרובים אליו כאדוני אלוהינו בכל קוראינו אליו ומי גוי גדול אשר לו חוקים ומשפטים צדיקים ככל התורה הזאת אשר אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום. We did it. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Tisha. Please rise, everyone. We lift the Torah. There's no Chatzi Kaddish.
Who's lifting?
We have a lifter, Hagba. Reuben, we need you. You want to lift? In a couple years. V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Mizmor shir liyom haShabbat tov li'odol l'nalizah b'neshim chaliyon Yishpan al-yezer sin azod b'vrot shemaisav dikvot le'aven yitparu kol le'aven v'tabed in b'shraim Tzadik tamani frak eros bavnol nishnosh numivedan al-hafrichu od yenevum b'seiv ad shenivranim yu lagid ki asher Adonai tzurim v'lo avla tabo Yahalelu et shem Adonai ki niskav shemo levado hodol al eretz v'shamayim v'yaharem keren liyamom Tila lecho chasitav livnei Yisrael am karovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. LeDavid mizmor, l'Adonai arasim lo tevo v'yoshveva. Ki hu yamim yesada. Mi'ale bahar Adonai u'mi'akum likvan kodsho. Iki kapayim u'valeva v'shalasav nashav nashi. ולא נשפע למרמה, זה דור דורשיו מבקשי פניך יעקב סלע. שאו שנים ישכם מפסיס מעולם, ויבוא מלך הכבוד, מיהו זה מלך הכבוד, שאו שנים ישכם, ויבוא מלך הכבוד, צבודים מלך הכבוד סלע, ובנוחו יאמר, שוב אדוני ריבודיו ישראל, כהניך יבשו צדק, כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזובו, עץ חיים היא, למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר, דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה Shalom, Hashivenu, Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Meinu יתקדע ויתקדש שמי רבה ביעמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וימכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל ברגע וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ומעמיה יפרף ישתבח יתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קדושה בריחו לעילה מכל בחדה ושירתה תושבחה ונחמתה Damiram biyamav imru. Amen. Together we begin the Mincha for Shabbat, Amidah, page 223. Oh, might as well use that, huh? It's a nice fitativ tachim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. האל הגדול גיבור ונורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל זוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גואב לבניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ופוקד מושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור עולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, מתיר אסורים, ומקיים אותו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך מעמיד ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. קדושה, page 225. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר. קדוש, קדוש, קדוש אדוני צבאות, מלוך על הארץ כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד נעים ממקומו דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור. לא כללי ציון, דור ודור הללויה, לדור ודור נגיד גולך, לנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושפרך אלוהינו בפיל ימוס עולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדושת ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Our vision of redemption to come at the end of Shabbat, page 226 through page 229 in silence. אתה אחד ושמך אחד, אברהם יגר, יצחק ירנן, יעקב ענב יחובו, מלכת אמת באמת, מלכת שלום ושלווה והשגב בפתח, יקרו ונחבדו כמנחה עם מלכתם ולמלכתם ידישו את שמך. סבינו מדוב סמשותך, פן כליל אלוהים ביעבר ורסון שבת קודשך, וינוחו וישראל מקשמך, ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. תחזינו ושלח שכתוב לציון מודים אנחנו לך, צור חיינו דבשנו, הטוב כי לא חל הרחמים וסרח לא אפיח לא. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך להודות, שלום רב ישראל. כי אתה הוא המלך והשם בדור ונשמך, ברוך אתה לישראל בשלום. סלם אנשי ושתך. עשה שלום יבוא. Kaddish Shalem, page 230. It Gadav Yitila Shemei Rabba. Yalma Divrach, Yerutevel Mik Malkute Bechaychon of Yimachon of Chayachol Israel. Bagalavis Man Karivim Ru. Amen. Yehe Shmei Rabba Mevarach. Yallam Alam Mehamaya. Yiparaf Yishtabaf Yitbar Vitromam Vitnase Vitadar. Vitale Vitalash Mekudisha Brichu. Leila Mikol Bechav Shirata. Tushbechatav Nechmata Damiram Biyamav Imru. Amen. Tit Kabal Tzlal Honaval Honachol Yisrael Kadam Avhon Yishmaya Vimru. Amen. Yesh Lama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael Vimru. Amen. Ose Shalom Bimromav. Uyase Shalom. Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imru. Amen. We're right back up. Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach. Ladon hakol. Latet gedula. Yotzer breishi. Shelo asanu. Kigoye haratzon. V'lo samanu. Kamishpechot ha'adama. Shelo sam chelkenu kahem. V'gohar aleinu. Kechol hamonam. V'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, She'onu Teshamayim v'yosel haaretz. Al kein nikav v'chad Adonai Eloheinu, ויקבלו כל המת או מלכותך, ותמלוך עליהם ירדתם כמלכות שלך היא, ולאו מעטים לו בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. Mourners Kaddish, mourners and those observing yahrzeit. Yit Gadal v'yit Gadal Shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divarach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yamechon, v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalah v'izman kariv, v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'lam l'meo maya, yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, Shmei de Kudusha, Brichu. Va'ela min kol bechata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, damiran bi'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, huyaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. All right, we're still in the ending minutes of Shabbat. So before we go right into, there's no formal Havdalah, and we go into Tisha B'Av, just recitation of first the blessing about the difference between Kodesh and Chol. And we're supposed to look at a burning flame. We'll have to make do with the electricity we have. But there's no wine. There's nothing to partake of on this particular end of Shabbat. So I thought it would be nice before we do the Mariv, have the Mariv service, maybe have some reflections from the two of us. You want to go first, Rabbi Singer? It's a pleasure to have Rabbi Singer here and Kol HaNeshama. And you'll speak first because we still have some minutes before we actually can begin our Mariv. Let me put everything away. And I had my shoes for Tisha B'Av, but I forgot to bring them. So I just have to take my shoes off. That's it. Yeah.
I don't have a watch on though because I had no watch that was all metal. I only had leather straps.
Well, just the shoes, but okay,
So
we're
it's
fine.
Tisha B'Av. It's not Tisha B'Av. It's that day with Tisha B'Av, but we don't do Tisha B'Av on Shabbat. There's a law in Talmud. It says, please do not desecrate Shabbat by failing to delight in Shabbat. So Shabbat's all about delight. So we push back Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av. Dancing is a lot of fun. Dancing.
It's really the 10th of Av.
So
Sorry. Yeah.
Tisha B'Av means the 9th day of Av.
Oh, you'll have to put on the on. I'm sorry.
Now?
Now you can.
Now we go. Whoa.
Now,
Okay.
wow, now we
So
do
Tisha B'Av, it's a date. It's like the 4th of July, right? It describes the day. But it's the 9th day of the month of Av. But this year it fell on Shabbat. So we don't do that. We don't do mournful things on Shabbat. So we had a regular Shabbat, and now we're celebrating Tisha B'Av starting tonight when Shabbat's over. And it's a commemoration. It is a day when we remember what happened long, long, long ago. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs once said, Jerusalem is the hope of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people's hope is what keeps them alive. And that's what keeps us alive. We can remember days like Tisha B'Av. It was a day of death and destruction throughout the millennia. There have been times on Tisha B'Av, or right about the date, where bad things happened. We got kicked out of Spain. We got kicked out of England. One of the really worst things of the West Warsaw Ghetto took place in this date. It's the doldrums of summer. It's the really, really hot days of summer, late July and early August. And tempers flare, and tempers have flared. And we have been taken the brunt of that when these things happen. But rather than sit around and mourn and tear our clothes and be as if we are in mourning, I would rather take this as an opportunity both to remember and to look forward and to grow. Because Judaism is not what it was back then. We can blame whoever we want to blame for the destructions of the temples, but we're not who we were. We're somebody completely different. The men of the Talmud recreated Judaism. They were the first reconstructionists. They took it and they redid it and created something brand new, which is the Judaism that we celebrate today. So I created something this year for my congregation. A friend of mine put it online, and it's been downloaded 700 times, I understand, and it's still going. So I brought a couple copies in case anyone's interested, because there's a really cool thing that happens in the Jewish calendar. We have the Omer, right? From Passover to Shavuos, which is how many days? 49 days. So from Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah happens to be 49 days. So you can celebrate it or observe it or help yourself get from Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah and be in a spiritual state by counting those 49 days. So I made this tool for my congregation. I brought a couple copies, which I'll just leave here. It's a reverse Omer calendar, starting with and every day has a quotation. And every week is set up as a week. They're broken down so that you can use them as meditation tools. You can use them as whatever. They are not all Jewish. In fact, the quote for Tisha B'Av, I did 50, so I started with Tisha B'Av, is, "In the midst of winter, I found within me an invincible summer," which was Albert Camus. There are Jewish quotes, there are non-Jewish quotes, there are quotes from people you've heard of and maybe some from people you haven't heard of. And I'm going to read you the very last one because it's one of the most hopeful things I think I have ever read. This is for Erev Rosh Hashanah, Sunday, September 25th. Asked why, at age 93, he still practiced cello for 3 hours a day, Pablo Casals said, "I am beginning to notice some improvement." As we look forward to the high holidays, note that we are looking forward for some improvement, but we don't have to reach perfection. Thanks.
Very good. That's fine. It makes a lot of racket when it comes off. Thank you, Rabbi Sue. I just have some short remarks to make. What would be appropriate for Tisha B'Av? I have to admit to you, I've held something back the last few weeks that was totally embarrassing to me. You can't hear? All right, let's use the other one then, and let me turn this up. Okay. Hello. Very good. So, getting back to where I started, I have been totally embarrassed to share this with the congregation, but I waited for Tisha B'Av to do so. Something that weighed very heavily on me when I was in London and worried about my mother and could not believe that this was going on in Jerusalem. At the Kotel wing, and I was very involved to try to come up with a compromise solution of the non-Orthodox and the Orthodox at the wall. There was a bat mitzvah at the Masorti congregations used the Robinson Arch part of the Kotel for their prayers and sanctification. I always brought groups there. It was fine. This particular Shabbat morning, there was a young woman, bat mitzvah, who was having her bat mitzvah there, and the yeshiva buchers came from the other side, not to look, but to disturb the bat mitzvah. Not only did they disturb the bat mitzvah, calling Jews who were reading from the Torah Nazis, goyim, they ripped out pages from our prayer book, the Lev Shalem, and they used the pages of the Siddur to blow their noses to show contempt for those who are not like them. That weighed very heavily on me. I don't know how much attention you've read or seen about that, but The greatest horror in my own thinking of the Jewish people, and I think those of you who know me already know how much I love all the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael. This really hit very hard on those of you who yearn and pray for the day when we truly are not all the same. We don't want to be the same, but to respect each other for our differences. And it seems that the climate, especially with the Haredim and the non-Haredim in Israel, has worsened, and it's been awful. And remember that the rabbis tried to figure out why the temple was destroyed, the second temple, and they pointed to the sin of sinat chinam, of needless hatred of Jew for Jew, which is true. It's historical reality. There were different Jewish camps in Jerusalem fighting the Romans, and they were fighting each other just as much as they were fighting the Romans. It's a very sad account. And we're still living with it. It's hard to believe after the Shoah, after everything we've been through, that Jews would even think of disparaging other Jews. Because if we're not at least have a semblance of unification, we're going to have other disasters. It's written in our history, the importance of being one. Especially, there are so many people who dislike us. There were no calculations made by the Nazis when they send Jews to their death camps, whether one was Orthodox or not Orthodox. We're all Jews. So it's very sad for me to share that with you. And that Tisha B'Av is really a time, I think, of self-reflection about what we can do and what has happened to our people that we would be so divided. You know, there's talk about Israel being an apartheid state, which has absolutely nothing to do with the reality of Israel. The Jews have created their own apartheid. Haredim neighborhoods, non-Haredim neighborhoods. If there's any apartheid, it's within ourselves. We're not mingling. We're not doing enough to get to know each other. I just want to share a couple incidents, since you mentioned Rabbi Sachs, whom I was very close to in London until his passing, sudden passing. We had a lot of time with each other. We studied Talmud together. And one of the things that really set back his credibility, sadly, was when a good friend of his, a Holocaust survivor, really the leading rabbi of the Reform movement in London, passed away. His name was Hugo Grin, a brilliant man. His widow's still alive, and we were close. She used to come to our synagogue quite a bit. He did not attend the funeral for his friend, his colleague, Reform rabbi, because of the pressure of the ultra-Orthodox warned him not to go there. And he suffered so much for that. He admitted to me that it was the worst decision he could possibly have made in his life because of the politics that existed of those who were controlling him. It was very sad. To be honest, there's also bigotry in the non-Orthodox world towards the Orthodox, and I experienced that quite a bit. I'll give you another personal example. One of the first trips, I like taking trips. We're going to be going back there with Dr. Polanski in May, but one of the places we're going to go to is Krakow in Poland, which is close to Auschwitz. And when you're in Krakow, you see one of the oldest Jewish cemeteries in Europe. It's the burial of Moses Isserlis, the great Rav, and Yoel Sirkis, the Bach, and many other luminaries. And when you're there in that cemetery, which dates back to the 16th century, I'm not sure if there were older gravestones, but you'll see all kinds of Hasidic groups there, visiting the great Rabbanim who were buried there. They're there all the time. And so I had my group, and there was a group of Hasids there, and they were reciting Tehillim or whatever they were doing there. And I said to my group, I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to go and join them. And they said, Rabbi, you're not dressed like them. They're gonna spit on you. They're gonna be, because we have these fears of the ultra-Orthodox. So I went there and I joined them, and they were shuckling all around me. And at the end of their shuckling and whatnot, they said, "Join us." Well, there was one fellow from New Jersey, an ultra chassid. He said, "Join us for Mincha." There was an ohel, a prayer ohel there nearby. I said, "Sure." So I went in with the chassads. There were about 25 of them. And then they said, you lead the Mincha service. I didn't have a prayer book or anything, but I led the service. And they davened, and a couple of them were crying, and they welcomed me like you cannot believe it. These were ultra charedim. Your rabbi has a lot of chutzpah joining them, but I did. I wanted to prove a point, that the great gap here is because the secular world has not done enough to reach out to the Haredi world. It goes both ways. There's a wall that has divided us. And my experience was, all these people want is some kind of respect, and they have to learn to respect those who are different from they are, because they live in a very narrow, sheltered world. But that incident really reminded me that it is possible to break down the barriers, and we need to break down those barriers, even though their world is so vastly different from where I'm coming from. But reaching out and being with fellow Jews, even though they're Haredim from, I don't know where they were from in Israel, but probably Mea Shearim, one of the Hasidic sects. So I share that with you because I think the greatest challenge this Tisha B'Av and always is the sinat chinam, this needless hatred. And it's also very interesting that the sin that destroyed the first temple, according to the rabbis, was avodat kochavim, idolatry, the rejection of one God. Now that's also related to sinat chinam, because the oneness of God is all about the diversity of humanity and the diversity of the Jewish people. But oneness means that we have to create a oneness in our diversity, and that we continue to sin for the loss of the first temple and the needless hatred that stems from that in the loss of the second temple. And it's a good time to reflect upon that. And we have to do everything here, as the rabbis taught us themselves. What is the solution to sinat chinam? Ahavat chinam. Love, unconditional love for our fellow Jews. Ahavat Yisrael. And we have to work very hard from all the different sectors of the Jewish community to create a oneness that will bring us together before it's too late. I just want to share one quote. There are a couple of them, but one I want to finish with from the Talmud Yerushalmi. A beautiful quote from a rabbi that I don't know, Rabbi Yanne, and he wrote, this is almost 2,000 years ago, had the Torah been given with one cut, without the possibility of divergent opinions, we, the Jewish people, cannot stand on our own place for 1 minute. This is a very profound comment made a long time ago about the divisions of the Jewish people. The fact is, we've never really been united, and it's going to be the great challenge, I think, of the Zionist dream to come. The work needs to be done. Redemption's not here yet. That's why we have to continue to fast. We have a long way to go. So, Som Kal, I think we're dark enough now to begin. Mavdil ben Kodesh lechol. That's essentially our Havdalah until we recite the blessing over the lights that come later. So let's see. I don't have a little keynote. Oh, do we have extra copies?
Yeah.
For what you don't have yours? So the tradition here is to, I wish we could dim the lights a little bit, but whatever we can do. And not to wear leather shoes. And to fast, of course. It's going to be a long 25 hours. Much harder than Yom Kippur because it's so hot. That's why we're going to stay inside tomorrow. And good. Oh, that's good. And the service is daven before we get to the recitation of the book of Lamentations, Echa, to do so in a very somber, low-key voice, because the sadness begins. I'm not even going to say Shavua Tov to you because we go into the fast. Oh, okay. Well, it's bright. I liked it the other way. Can you see it all? You can't, if the light's not on, you can't, this is off? Is that what you're saying? Well, I could say, but that's okay. Leave it as it is. Leave it as it is. Please rise. Page 1 in our booklets here. Adonai Hashem Elchianeinu v'yom koreinu. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai l'melech haolam asher b'yivaro ma'arivecha v'chesed. Borei yom v'layla. Ma'avir yom v'layla ma'avdil ben yom v'layla Adonai tzvo shemo el chai v'kayam tamid moch le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Mari Varavim, Avat Olam Beit Yisrael, Torah Mitzvot, Nisma B'divrei Torah Temes V'Olam V'hen, Kim Chayenu V'yorach Yameinu V'hem Nigam V'Layla, V'avatcha Tasir Mimim Baruch Atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מידך. ושנתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך ביתך ולך לדרך ושבמך. שתם לבתי ידיך ודודמך ודיברתם עוזתך וישרך. והיה אם שמותי שמוע מצוותי אשר הולכים מצוותך היום. מצאתי מסרתכם בעיתו יום וכל שבתך ושבתי יצא. שובו לכם בדיעבד וזרתם לכבישתך ולכם. Also verschwunden besamtem zu rein, שדם אותם לידיכם. אימתם אותם את בניכם לדבר בם. תפתם וזבתכם ושלמה יברכם ושמותיכם. לתת להם כשמיים מעוז ויום עליהם בשלם ודבר וסרם ליום ציצית. אלא בציצור לקלס כמקום מצוות סדמות ותגלו ושמתם לאדם תזכרו וסבקות שבסם אלא לכם. אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים. להיות לכם לאלוהים. Ani Adonai Elohim. Adonai Elohim, Emet, page 7. Emet v'nmakol zofikayim aleinu. Ha'oseh gedolei cheker niflo lemispar. Ha'oseh lanu nesim d'gama b'farod emet b'necham. Ma'avir b'ana ben Yisrael suf et rofihem v'yotim b'cham tipa. Pharaoh v'navru v'shibavli shemo, malchuto b'ratzon kibalehem, Moshe v'Yisrael, l'chanu shra b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam, michamocha b'elim Adonai, mikamocha neda b'kodesh, norati lo tosef elem, malchuta ruvanecha b'gayam lifnei Moshe, ze lianu v'yamru, Adonai yimloch l'olam v'en, v'ne'amar ki v'Adonai Yaakov, v'galo mi'at chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Page 9, prayer for peace. Hashkivenu. Ushmot tzaytenu va'enechai mishalom. Mi'ata v'yad olam baruch atah Adonai. Shomer amo Yisrael la'ad. Baruch Adonai Elohim Amen v'Amen. V'hem Yerushalayim. Hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Yisrael. Ikvod Adonai Yismak Mamasav Hashem Adonai Avram Elolam Ki Lo Toshad Amo. V'yar kol ha'am yudbal b'neihem b'yom ha'hu Adonai Echad Yishma Echad. Nahoto l'Shem Kodshech l'Yishvat Yaltech l'Elohim Asher Yavod Yivshnef L'Fnech Baruch Adonai Bayom, Baruch Adonai Balayla, Baruch Adonai B'Shof Beinu, Baruch Ameinu. B'yadcha nafshot ha'chayiv ha'metim asher b'yado nefesh kol chai. Eloheinu b'shamayim yachet shimcha. Yero aninu v'smach libeinu v'kol Hashem v'shuatecha b'yama. Kein lana melech la'ata, Baruch atah Adonai, melech b'kvadot, hamir moch le'lam v'ed v'al kol. Ma'asav. Please rise. Chatzi Kaddish, page 11. Yit kadav yit kadash shemer rabba. B'yalma divrach yerutei v'mik machutei b'chayachon v'mimchon. V'chay d'kol b'yit Yisrael v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shemer rabba mevorach l'olam amimaya. Yipara vishtaba vitbar, vitromam vitnase, vitadar vitale, vitalash miglisha, brichu leila mikovgada shirata, tushbechata v'nechmatata midam biyama, vimuru. Amen. Page 13 begins the silent Amidah. Our prayers through page 21. And of course, we include the section for the end of Shabbat. Shalom chasukim kolei v'mnekim v'kolavom v'midvakim b'yiratecha v'boneim v'yachradim v'yaskem Baruch atah Adonai v'niradat. Baruch atah Adonai shaverat v'machli yazidim Baruch atah Adonai misham v'tzadikim yasham Baruch atah Adonai Yitgadav Yitgala Shemei Rabbah B'yamal Yivrach Chirutei V'mikmokute B'chaychon Mirchon Uv'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael V'zman Kari V'imru Amen Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach D'Elohim Maya Yipparach V'yishtabach V'yitbar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitadeh V'yitlash Mivusha B'richu Leila Mikov G'dashirata Tushbechach V'nechmata D'Ibram B'yamav V'imru Amen Yehei Shlama Rabbah Mishamaya V'chayim Aleinu V'chol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yase shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei me'orei ha'esh. That's our Havdalah. I think we're ready to begin again, as mentioned by Rabbi Singer. A lot of things happen on Tisha B'Av, destruction of the first temple, 586. Remember that 2/3 of our people were exiled, mostly went to Babylonia. In the year 70, the Romans, under the leadership of Vespasian in Rome and his son Titus in Jerusalem, destroyed the second temple in the year 70 of the Common Era in the middle of the Jewish revolt. Bedlam, Hor, the temple was destroyed, never to be rebuilt after that. And again, massive expulsion. Jews were not allowed to step foot in Jerusalem. And then with the second revolt, Jews were not allowed to live in the entire, even close to the area. So Jews had to, on Tisha B'Av, came and look at their Temple Mount in destruction and ashes. Rabbi Akiva was there, and he saw only foxes running across the Temple Mount. It was completely barren until the Muslims came and conquered Jerusalem in the 6th century under Omar. And he allowed the Jews actually to come back to the Temple Mount, and that was before the mosque was built. So it's a very interesting part of the reclaim of Jerusalem. In the year, the Second Crusade was launched on Tisha B'Av, which led to the death of a massive number of our people in Western Europe. In 1290, the Jews were expelled from England, not to return until 1651. And then, of course, 1492 was the last day that the Jews could leave Spain, and the greatest mass expulsion in proportion has ever been recorded in history. So that occurred on that last day the Jews could leave. They had about 2.5 months to leave the country. It's an interesting story. I think we shared it last year. And so the Tisha B'Av was a reminder of the expulsion from Spain. World War I began on Tisha B'Av, and Himmler devised got the okay from the Führer, their Führer, to initiate the final solution that occurred on Tisha B'Av. And I'm sure there are other incidents that I have not remembered, and now Israel's having missiles flying to its country there. So we are about to read from the book of Lamentations. Why don't we begin with I'm going to do a little of introduction. Let's do the reading on page 27 to get us into the proper frame of mind. Our God of our ancestors, at this hour we have gathered to observe Tisha B'Av, a truly sad day in the history of our people. With deep sorrow we call two tragic events in Jewish history, when conquering tyrants destroyed the holy temples and laid Jerusalem in ruins. Mournfully we recall the glory that was Zion's, and in the words of Scripture we bemoan its tragic fate. Although our people, homeless for centuries, wandered from land to land, their love for Zion and Jerusalem remained constant. We are grateful, O Lord, that ours has been the privilege of witnessing the restoration of Zion and the return of our people to their ancient land. As we voice our thanks, we pay tribute to those brave men and women who gave their lives so that Israel might be reborn. As we mourn the destruction of our holy city and its temple, we mourn too the loss of 6 million of our people when the concentration camps and gas chambers of Europe died for the sanctification of your name. They shall ever be remembered, along with countless thousands of our people, martyrs all, who have given their lives throughout the ages in defense of their religious convictions. May it be your will, O Lord, that all violence, tyranny, and terror may cease. Speed the day when people everywhere shall turn to you and live together in freedom and peace. Amen. So let me just a couple of words of introduction. There's a bit of an introduction on the page 28. But who wrote the book of Lamentations? According to the Talmud, it was the prophet Jeremiah, because Jeremiah lived at the time of the destruction of the temple. But most scholars don't agree with that. They believe that each chapter was written by a different author because of the different character of the 5 chapters, and might have been inspired by Jeremiah, but it is unlikely that Jeremiah wrote. I'll leave that up to you, however we deal with that biblical scholarship. The text is divided into 5 chapters, and of course 5 is a very important number. The 5 books of the Torah. It's almost as if it's a play on the number 5, that Torah can be lost so easily with destruction and sadness. The first chapter is about Jerusalem, the shattered, lonely city of Jerusalem. A lot of imagery from Jeremiah, but not in the same language, and a grieving for the people of Jerusalem who suffered the most during the Babylonian conquest and siege in 586 BCE. Chapter 2, there is a shifting to the siege of the city, kind of before, and what the city experienced before the destruction was, before the destruction that occurred by the Babylonians, was starvation and a lot of doom. A lot of the population died before the city was conquered by the Babylonians. And then chapter 3 it goes to the individual, completely different text, about a lonely man who was bereft of any sense of hope, who experienced exile in Babylonia. So that narrowed the text to the experience of an individual. Chapter 4 is about the city of Jerusalem in the last hours before its destruction, and the witness gazes upon the degradation of the city. And it's very interesting. I mean, what's in my head here, of course, is how horrible it was in 1948 when our people had to look at the evacuation of the Jewish quarter in the old city of Jerusalem. We've experienced this over and over again. And chapter 5 is a prayer of reminding us to remain loyal in our memory of Judah. So those are basically the 5 chapters. You see, they all have very different themes. 4 of the first 4 chapters are written in acrostic. That means from Aleph through Tav, 22 verses. They're all the same, except the 5th chapter breaks the mold, because the 5th chapter is the chapter of hope, with order is restored from the chaos that is basically the literary style of the first 4 chapters. There is an appeal, as I mentioned this morning, the word Echa, the last letter, Hey, asks also, which we're allowed in our tradition, where were you, God? Why is there suffering in the world? Where is the silent? Why is God silent in the face of what our people have had to endure? And so punishment occurs, and our people have for centuries tried to figure out what our responsibility is. As I mentioned, idolatry and needless hatred. But of course, we have to also remind ourselves that the diabolic nature of hatred and anti-Semitism is very much alive and part of our experience. Try to retain our hope and our responsibility to redeem the world. So that, in a nutshell, is a good introduction to the text, and I think we're ready to begin. Chapter 1 of Echa, Lamentations, on page 29. I'm first. Oh. Echa Shabbaton Ayer. I gotta get into the Rusa. Rabati Ha'ir Rabati Hayeta Ka'amana Rabati Vagoyim. So Ayesarati Bamdinot Hayeta Lamas Bachutiv Kebalayla Dimata Lechaya Ilam Nachem Kolohaveha. I'm not in the trope here. Koroeha Bagda Baya Ila Oivim Kalta Yuda Meoni Meravavoda Hi Ashvavagoyim Lo Matzata Manoa Korot Fea Isigu Habenim Sarim Darche Tzion Avelut Niblim Bae Moed Kol Sareha Shomemim Kohaneha Nenachim Betuloteha Dugot Vehim Alam Hayut Sareha L'rosh Oiveha Shahalu Ki Adonai Hogalara B'Shaeha Olaleha Halachu Shvi Livnei Tzar V'yetzemi Batzion Kodara Hayu Sareha Gayalim Lo Matzah Mirem Vayehu B'lo Koach Livnei Rodev Zachar Yerushalayim Yemei On Yam Rudeha Kol Machmudeha Asher Hayu Mimei Kedem B'nofel Amab Yatzar Ve'ein Ozer Laha Ra'u hatzaharim sachaku al mishpateha Chet chata Yerushalayim al ken lidayata Kol mechabdeha hiziluha ki ra'u ervata גם היא נאנחה ותשב אחור. טומאתם בשולהם, לא זכרה אחריתם. ותרד פלאים, אין מנחם להם. ראה אדוני את עוני, כי הגדיל אויב. ידו פרס צר, על כל מחמדיה, כי ראתה גויים באו מקדשה, אשר ציוותה לא יבואו בקלח. כל המננחים מבקשים לחם, נתנו מחמידם ברוחו אוכל להשיב נפש. ראה אדוני והביטה, כי הייתי זוללה. לא עליכם כל עוברי דרך הביטו ראו, אם יש מכאוב כמכאובי, אשר עולה לי, אשר הוגה אדוני ביום חרון אפו. ממרום שלח אש בעצמותי וירדנה, פרס רשת לרגלי, השיבני אחור. נתנני שוממה, כל היום דבר נשקד. על פשעי בידו, הסתגו עלו צווארים, הכשיל כוחי. נתנני אדוני בידי לא חכום. סילה כל אבירי אדוני בקרבי קרא עלי, מועל לשבור בחורי. גת רך אדוני לבתולת בת יהודה, על אלה אני בוכייה, איני יורדה מים. כי רחב ממני מנחם משיב נשים, היו בני שוממים, כי גבה אויב. פרסה ציון בידיה, אין מנחם להם. ציווה אדוני ליעקב סביביו צרה, הייתה ירושלים לנידה בניהם. צדיקו אדוני כי פיהו מריתי, שימונה כל העמים וראו מכאובי. בתולתי ובחורי הלכו בשבי. קראתי למאהבי המה רימוני, כהני זקני בעיר גבהו. כבישו אוכל לעמו, וישיבו את נפשם. ראה אדוני כי שר לי, מאי חומר מרו, נפח ליבי בקרבי, כי מרו מריתי. מחוץ שיקלה חרב בבית כמוות, שמעו כי נחנה אני מנחם לי. כל אויבי שמעו רעתי, ששו כי אתה עשית. הבאת יום קראת ויוחמוני. תבוא קוראתם לפניך, ועולל למו, כאשר עוללתם לי על כל פשעי, כי רבות הנחותי, וליבי דווי.
Echa Yair Bapo Adonai et Bat Zion Hishlich Mishamayim Eretz Tiferet Yisrael Lo Zachar Hadon Raglav B'Yom Apo Bila Adonai V'lo Chamal Et Kol Neot Yaakov Haras Bi'avrato Mivtzarei Bat Yehuda Higia La'aretz Chila Mamlacha V'sareha Gada Bechariav Kol Keren Yisrael Heishiv Achor Yemino Mipnei Oyev Vayevar B'Yakov Ke'esh Lehava Achla Saviv Darakashto Ke'oyev Nitzab Yemino Ketzar Vayaharog Kol Machamadei Ayin Va'ohel Bat Zion Shafach Ha'esh Chamato Haya Adonai Koyev Bila Yisrael Bila Kol Armanoteha Shichet Mivtzarav Vayara Bavat Yehuda Taniya Va'aniya Vayachmos Kagan Suko Shichat Moado Shikach Adonai B'Tzion Moed V'Shabbat Vayinatz B'Zam Apo Melech V'Chohen Zanach Adonai Mizbacho Ni'er Mikdasho Hiskir B'Yad Oyev Chomat Amnoteha Kol Natnu B'Beit Adonai Kiyom Moed Chashav Adonai Lashchit Chomat Bat Zion Natakav Lo Yeshiv Yado Mi Baleya Vayavel Chal V'Koma Yachtav Lalu Tavu V'Eretz Shareha Ibad V'Shiber Bricheha Malka V'Sareha B'Goyim Ein Torah Gam Neviyeha Lo Matzu Chazon Me-Adonai Yeshvu La'aretz Yidmu Ziknei Bat Zion Helu Afar Al Rosham Chagru Sakim Horidu La'aretz Rosham Betulaot Yerushalayim Kalu Vidmaot Nai Chamar Meru Me'ayin Nishpach La'aretz Kavedi Al Shever Batami Be'atev Olel V'yonek Birchavot Kirya Limotam Yomru Aye Dagan Bayayin Behit Atfam Kechalal Birchavot Ir Behishtapech Nafsham El Chek Imotam Ma'adiyech Ma'ad Melach Habat Yerushalayim Ma'ashvelach Va'anachamech Betulat Bat Zion Ki Gadol Kayam Shivrech Mir Palach Nevi'ayich Chazulach Shav V'Tafel V'lo Gilu Al Avonech Lahashiv Shvutech Vayechezu Lach Masot Shav Umaduchim Savku Alayach Kapim Kol Ovrei Derech Sharku Vayani Rosham Al Bat Yerushalayim Hazot Ha'ir Sheyamru Kalilat Yofi Masos L'chol Haaretz Patsu Alayich Pihem Kol Oyavayich Sharku Vayachar Kushain Amru Bilanu אך זה היום שקיווינו מצאנו ראינו, עשה אדוני אשר זמם. ביצע אמרתו אשר ציווה מימי קדם, הרס ולא חמל. וישמח עלייך אויב, הרים קרן צריך. צעת ליבם אל אדוני, חומת בציון. הורידי קנך אל דמעה יומם ולילה, אל תתני פוגת לך, אל תדום בת עינך. קומי רוני ולילה, לראש השמורות שפכי חמים ליבך, נוכח פני אדוני, שאי אליו כפייך, על נפש על עלייך, עטופים ברב בראש כל חוצות. ראה אדוני והביטה, למי עוללתו. אם תאכלנה נשים פריים עוללי טיפוחים, אם יהרג במקדש אדוני כהן ונביא. שכבו לארץ חוצות נער וזקן, בתולתי ובחורי נפלו בחרב. הרגת ביום אפיך, טבחת לא חמלת. תקרא כיום מועד מגורי מסביב, ולא היה ביום אף אדוני פליט ושריד. אשר טיפחתי וריביתי, אויבי קהילם.
So just as a matter of introduction, the first, second, fourth, and fifth chapters are all chanted with the special cantillation of Echa, the only time this cantillation is used in the entire Jewish calendar. And each of those chapters, 1, 2, 4, and 5, have 22 verses, the number of letters of the Hebrew alphabet. As the rabbi pointed out, 1, 2, and 4 are alphabetical acrostics. But whoever composed the fifth chapter decided also that it should be only 22 verses. And this third chapter is actually 66 verses. So you have 22 times 3. And each letter then gets 3 verses. And so it still maintains the idea of an alphabetical acrostic, and they're coupled all together. They're very short verses, but so they're, in a way, you could consider them also to be 22 verses, but kind of triplets of 22 different letters. And it has, because of that, it has its a special tune, special Ashkenazi tune, and it's just basically 3 phrases that repeat itself for each letter. So after the first few, you might catch on and sing with me. Feel free to join with me. Ani hagevera oni b'shevet evrato oti nahag vayolach choshech v'laoch ach biyashuv v'yafoch yado kol hayom bila v'sari v'yori shibar atzmotai Bana alai vayakaf rosh utla b'machashakim oshivani k'metei olam גדר בעדי ולא אצא, יכביד נחשתי. גם כי אזעק ואשבע, סתם תפילתי. גדר דרכי בגזית, נתיבותי בה. דוב עורב חולי, ארי במסתרי. דרכי סורר ויפחשכני, שמני שומם. דרך קשתי ויציבני, כמטרה לחץ. הביא בכליותי בני אשפתו, הייתי שחוק לכל עמי, נגינתם כל היום. הספיאני במרומים, הרבני לענף. Feel free to join. ויגרס בחצץ שיני, הכפישני באפר. ותזנח משלום נפשי, נשיתי טובה. ואומר עבד נצחי, ותאכלתי מאדוני. זכרוני ומרודי לנה בראש. זכור תזכור, ותשוח עלי נפשי. זאת אשיבה ליבי, על כן אוכיל. חסדי אדוני כי לא תמנו, כי לא חלו רחמיו. חדשים לבקרים רבה אמונתך. חלקי אדוני אמרה נפשי. על כן אוכילה. טוב אדוני לקרובה ולנפש תדרשנו. טוב ויחיל ודומם לתשועת אדוני. טוב לגבר כי יישא עול בנעוריו. ישב בדד וידום כי נטל עלי. ייתן בעפר פיו אולי יש תקווה. ייתן למכהו לחי, יספע בחרפה. כי לא יזנח לעולם אדוני, כי עמו גב ריחם קרוב חסדיו. כי לא ינע מליבו, ויגע בני איש. לדכא תחת רגליו כל אסירי הארץ. להטות משפט קבר נגד פני עליון. ויעבט אדם בריבו, אדוני לרעה. מי זה אמר בתי, אדוני לא ציווה. מפי עליונות תצא הרעות והטוב. מה יתונן אדם חי, גבר על חטאיו. נחפשה דרכינו ונחורה ונשובה עד אדוני. נשא לבבינו אל כפיים, אל בשמיים. אנחנו פשענו ומרינו, אתה לא סלחת. סקות באף ותרדפנו, הרגת לא חמלת. סקות וענן לך, מעבור תפילה. זכיר ומעוז תשימנו בקרב העמים. פצו עלינו פיהם כל אויבינו, פחד ופחד היה לנו השט והשבר, פלגי מים תרדני, השבר בתמי. איני נגרע ולא תדמה מעין הפוגות, עד ישקיף וירא אדוני משמיים. איני עוללה לנפשי מכל בנות עירי, צודת צדוני כציפור אויבי חינם. צמתו ובור חיי וידו אבן בי, צפו מים על ראשי, אמרתי נגזרתי, קראתי שמך אדוני מבור תחתיות. קולי שמעת, אל תעלם אוזנך לרווחתי לשבתי. קרבת ביום אקראך, אמרת אל תירא. רבת אדוני ריבי נפשי, גאלת חיי. ראית אדוני עבדתי, שפת משפטי. ראית כל נקמתם, כל מחשבותם עלי. שמעת חרפתם אדוני, כל מחשבותם עלי. שפתי קמי והגיונם עלי כל היום. שבטם וקימתם הביטה, אני מנגינתם. תשיב אליהם מגמול אדוני כמעשה ידיהם. תיתן אליהם מגינת לב, תעלתך להם. תרדוף ביעף תשמידם, ותחת שמי אדוני.
איך יועם זהב ישקע הכתם הטוב, תשתפך נבני קודש בראש כל חוצות. בני ציון היקרים המסולאים בפז, איכה נחשבו לנבלי חרס, מעשה ידי יוצר. גם תנים חלצו שד, העניקו גוריהן, בת עמי לאכזר, קינאים במדבר. דבק לשון יונק, אל חיכו בעצמה. עוללים שאלו לחם, פורס אין להם. האוכלים למעדנים, נשמו בחוצות. האמונים עלי תולה, חיבקו השפטות. ויגדל עוון בת עמי, מחטאת סדום. ההפוכה כמרגע, ולא חלובה ידיים. זעקו נזיריה משלג, שחו מחלב. אדמו עצם מפנינים, ספיר גזרתם. חשך משחור תרם, לא נקראו בחוצות, צפת אורם על עצמם, יבש היה העץ. טובים היו חללי חרב וחללי רעב, שהם יעזבו מדוכרים מתנובות צדק. ידי נשים רחמניות בישלו ילדיהן, היו לברות למו בשבר בתמי, כי לאדוני את חמתו שפך ארון אפו, ויצאת אש בציון בתוך על יסודותיה. לא האמינו מלכי ארץ כל יושבי תבל, כי יבוא צר ואויב בשערי ירושלים, מחטאות נביאיה, הבנות כהניה, השופכים בקרבה דם צדיקים. נאו עברים בחוצות, נגאלו בדם, ולא יוכלו, ייגעו בלבושיהם. סורו טמא, קראו למו, סורו סורו, אל תיגעו, כי נצאו גם נאו. אמרו בגויים, לא יוסיפו לגור, פני אדוני חלקם, לא יוסיף להלביתם, פני כהנים לא נשאו, וזקנים לא חננו. עודנו תכלנה עינינו, אל עזרתנו הבל, בציפייתנו ציפינו, אל גוי לא יושיע. צעדו צעדינו מלכת ברחובותינו, קרב קיצנו, מלאו ימינו קיבה קיצנו. קלים היו רודפינו מנשרי שמיים, על ההרים דלקונו, במדבר אבו לנו. רוח אפינו משיח אדוני, נלכד בשחיתותם, אשר אמרנו בצילו נחיה בגויים. סיס ושמחי בת אדום, יושבת בארץ עוץ, גם עלייך תעבור כוס, תשכרי ותתערי. תם עוונך בציון, לא יוסיף להגלותך, פקד עוונך בת אדום, גילה על חטאותייך.
Zachar Adonai me'aya lanu, habita ur'e et herpatenu, nachalatenu nehefcha litzarim, batenu linkirim. Yitumim chayinu ein av, imotenu ke'almanot. Memenu bekesef shitinu, etzenu bimchir yavou. Al tzavarenu nardafnu, yiganu lo hunach lanu. Mitzrayim natanu yad, Ashur lisbo alachem. Avotenu chatenu enam, v'anachnu avonotehem savalnu. Avadim mishlovanu, porech en miyadam. Benafshenu nafilach menu, mipnei erev hamidbar. Orenu kitanur nichmaru, mipnei tzalafot ra'av. Nashim b'tzion ino, betulot be'ara Yehuda. Sarim be'adam natlu, pnei zkenem lo nedaru. Bachorim tichon nasa'u, unarim be'etz kishalu, zekenim misha'ar shavatu, bechorim min ginatam. Shivat mesos libenu, nakpad la'evel mecholenu. Nafla ateret roshenu, oina lanu ki chatanu. Al zeh hayadav libenu, al ele chashvu einenu. Al har Tzion sheshamim shu'alim hilchu vo. Ata Adonai le'olam teshev, kisacha ledor vador. Lama lanetzach tishkachenu, ta'azvenu le'orech yamim. V'hashvidenu Adonai Elohecha, v'nashuva chadesh amim kakedem. Ki ima'os ma'astenu, katzafta aleinu ad me'od. Hashivenu Adonai elecha, v'nashuva chadesh aminu kekedem.
On this day of remembrance and mourning, we call to mind, forgot. We call to mind the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem, the long bitter night of exile and persecution, and the great catastrophe which, in more recent times, befell our people. When in the past our brothers and sisters were massacred in ruthless pogroms, the poet Bialik cried out against the bloody Ir HaShchita, the city of slaughter. The cruelties of Pharaoh, Haman, Nebuchadnezzar, and Titus cannot be compared to the diabolical devices fashioned by modern tyrants in their desire to exterminate a whole people. Buchenwald, Dachau, Majdanek, Treblinka, Theresienstadt, etc. How can we ever forget the burning of synagogues, the destruction of the holy books and houses of learning, the degradation and murder of our scholars, sages, and teachers? The parchment was burnt, but the letters of the Torah were indestructible. Justice shall at last be done. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, כי עם כל זה אני מאמין. Page 46. O Lord, remember thy martyred children, remember all who have given their lives for Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of thy name. Grant their souls the peace reserved for all the righteous. As we mourn our people's tragedy, we also recall with heartfelt gratitude the righteous men and women of other faiths, nationalities who, at the peril of their lives, protected and saved thousands of our brothers and sisters who have a share in the world to come. I'm grateful to those who liberated the remaining Jews from imprisonment and torture, who rescued our people in Europe. With thankful hearts, we shall ever remember the care and encouragement they gave to all the tragically displaced persons. Let us all pray and work together for that day when there shall be no more violence or desolation. We have witnessed the darkest chapter of Jewish history. We have also witnessed our people's greatest triumph, the rebirth of the Jewish state. Same era of rejection, oppression, terror. We thank thee, O God, O Lord, that thou hast permitted us to behold thy return to Zion. Thou hast opened the gates, the west, and say to the give up, and to the south, do not with the brothers, thy sons from afar, and thy daughters from the ends of the earth. May we who live in this land of freedom help to sustain those of our people who are building the state of Israel. May it become secure and self-supporting, stronghold of democracy, bridge connecting the peoples of East and West. And remembering the vow of our forebears, may we also pledge, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand wither. You who are the Lord. For out of Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. Kenner Newman, would you like to lead us in Elitzion on page 48? Eha kiyom esa tzireha
V'chiftu lach agurasak al bam yureha alei armon asher nitash biashmatzon adareha v'yamiyat mechor fe'el בתוך מקדש חדריה, אלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה וציריה, תכיפתו לך הגורצק, על בניוריה, עלי גלות Mishatayel Nani Meshir Zareha Dial Dama Masher Shubach Kimo Memeyoreha Elitzion Biareha Kimo Isha V'Tireha Kiftu lach aguratzak al bal nureha.
Page 49, V'takadosh Hashem Tilot Yisrael Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Netzavod Malach Netzavodo Kadish al Hara Ovad Gevurtein Baruch Vodnamim Komo Adonai Melech Le'olam Va'ed Adonai Chutei D'Olam Haya Adonai Avraham Yisav Yisrael Avoteinu V'Avachenu V'Melech Avurachu Mechaper Avon V'Lashifer V'Lashifer B'Kol Chamato Asar V'Am Asher Nishbat Avotem Mekedem Baruch Adonai Yom Yom Eslanu V'Yoshotin Osela Adonai Shem Melcheinu V'Yom Koreinu Baruch Adonai Shem Elohim Kvodo V'Yivdala Mitoim Yasem Libavato Yotov L'Tzor Rasul Avdalah Shalem Leman Lo Ninakor בריק ולא נלד בלהלה ירצה מפניך ולבתנו. עמי זבר וידום נדלם הדקה ורק הקבר. וידם יפתחו בית חוב אדוני ידיעת כי ביד אדוני צור עולמים. ויפתחו וחדו ישמך כי לא עזבת דרשך אדוני. ענך וצלמן תקידות יגדיר תורה וידיר. יתקדע ויתקדע שמי רבה. ביעמד יברח חירותי וימליק מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון. ובחיי דחופק ישראל בגלל זמן קריב אמרו אמן. ישמי רבה מבורך ללממיה. יפרח וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ולהשפיע קדושה. בריך ולעילה מכל ותאשר אתה. תושבחתה ודגמתה דמרם בימיו אמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה בן שמיה וחיים עלינו וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Page 53, please rise. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצון, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגוהר עלינו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, קדוש ברוך הוא. שנה תשמע ויוסר הארץ, משה וכתוב בשמיים ממעל, שכנת בזוג לתקין עולם בחוץ שתה וכל דבר עושה בשם חלפת ולקבוע שמרתיתנו. כי המלכות שלך היא לעולמית עד תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורת אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו echad. Mourners and those observing yahrzeit, page 55. Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabba. Yalma divrach yerutei v'yamlich malchutei. Chayechon of yomechon of chayed echol beit Yisrael. Ba'agalav isman kariv imru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'lam l'mel maya. Yipara v'yishtabah v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. Vitadara, Vitale, Vitalal, Shmini Kudusha, Brichu, Lahila min kol bechata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechmata, Damiran bi'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. On this night, we're like mourners, so we don't have our usual exchanges of shalom, how are you? We're all in mourning, and so silence will exit our presence from here as we have begun so beautifully our remembrance of the past. I certainly want to thank everybody who helped make this a very meaningful Echa, chanting of Echa, and let's hope we will be able to see a world much more together, a Jewish world first, and of course, for all humanity. To leave on a positive note, the passage on page 58 was written by someone who I absolutely adored when I was a young rabbi, Rabbi Sidney Greenberg. And he wrote this beautiful reflection on what this is about, and I'd like to read that with you. Dear God, so much innocent blood. We are supposed to be created in your image, but oh, how we have distorted it. Everyone. When we read of the beastly acts of some, everyone, we're ashamed to be human. When we read of the nobility of their victims, we are proud to be Jews. If there's anything for which we can be grateful, is that we have been the victims, not the murderers, the persecuted, not the persecutors. Must clearly always be. Does humanity ever be the signature of mortals? No, we refuse to accept. Hatred, the last word, because we have known the power of love. We refuse to believe that cruelty will prevail, because we have felt the strength of kindness. We refuse to award the ultimate victory to evil because we believe in you too much. So help us, O God, to live by our faith. Where there is hatred, may we bring love. Where there is pain, may we bring healing. Where there is darkness, may we bring light. Where there is despair, may we bring hope. Where there is discord, may we bring peace. Make this a better world, O Lord. And begin, we pray, with us. Let's rise and finish with our hope. Hatikva, page 59. Kol baleva pinima nefesh yuli homia ulfate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia Olo avda tikvatenu Hatikva bat shnot alpayim Liotam chofshi be'atzenu Eretz Tzion Yerushalayim Liotam chofshi be'atzenu Eretz Tzion Yerushalayim. Dear God, hear our prayers. Protect the state of Israel and the Jewish people. May we learn from our memories to be strong and faithful and rebuild the world that what you want us to do. So everyone, I bid you all good evening.